Thank you so much for being here this evening. It's really good opportunity. I'm Katrina. I'm the Archdeacon of Cheltenham, acting Archdeacon of Gloucester at the moment. But really good to be with you all. Thank you for all that you do as churchwardens. I'm really pleased to be joined this evening by Debbie Long, my PA, and also Joss Moore, who's our diocesan registrar, who's going to be sharing in leading the session for us this evening. It would be really lovely if you're willing just to unmute yourself, and we'll go around and hear who you all are as well and where you're based, because that would just give us a sense of the location that each of us are coming in from this evening. So shall I invite you to unmute as we go round so that we get it in the order that's on my screen, which may not be the same order as yours. So Stephen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello, I'm Steve Bodle. I've recently been elected as churchwarden at Elmore, just south of Gloucester.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stephen. Welcome. David.
Hello, David Langdon. I'm churchwarden at Buses Walls.
Good to see you. Thank you. Susan. You might just...
That's better, yeah. I'm Susan Whitfield. I've been a long time churchwarden at Tresham, which is a very tiny hamlet at the top of a hill.
Lovely.
Of the Cotswolds. And the parish also has another church at the bottom of the hill at Alderley, but she couldn't. Yeah.
Thank you, Susan, very much. Graham.
Hi, I'm Graham Farrow from St Leonard's, Bladington, but I also look after Holy Ascension, Oddington.
Brilliant. Really good to see you. Thank you. Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian Champion. I'm currently at St Leonard's in Upton St Leonard's in Gloucester. And this is my third time of being the third church in which I've been a churchwarden.
Very good. Thank you. Michael.
I'm Michael Canvin, and I'm churchwarden at St Oswald's, Coney Hill in Gloucester.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Duncan.
Yeah, Duncan McGaw. I'm newly churchwarden of parish of Cobley and Cowley, which we brought together from being two separate ones. But I've been sort of doing the job for some time, formally taking it on.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Marilyn.
Hello, I'm not a churchwarden, but I may be an aspiring churchwarden, as there's going to be a couple of vacancies coming up next year, so I'm learning the ropes.
Fabulous.
And Steve, that's Stephen in the Forest Dean.
Lovely, that's great. Really good. Thank you. Job.
Hello, this is my first time being a churchwarden, and I worship at St John's Church Down, and it's a church down in Innsworth. Churches together, and what's the area? Is it Sevenvale? Yes.
Yeah, well done. Very good. Remember your deanery as well. Fantastic, Job. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nicola.
Hi, very nice to meet you all. I'm Nikki Clark. I have been churchwarden since last May, so just a year, and I couldn't join the training last year, so I'm really glad to be able to catch up on it this time.
Brilliant.
I'm churchwarden at St Giles in Ewley, St Bartholomew's, Nymphsfield, and Holy Cross in Alpen, which is our sort of parish, and yes, in the Wootton Deanery.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Rachel.
I'm Rachel Tarling. I'm churchwarden in St Christopher's in Morden Hill in Cheltenham.
Fabulous. Good to see you. Thank you. John.
Hello, John Hay. I'm churchwarden in North Nibley. This is year 6, but I'm here to find out what I should have been doing and haven't been doing, plus the fact that we're going into a vacancy very, very shortly.
Indeed, indeed. Great. Thank you very much. Chris.
Hi, everyone. if John's here to find out what he should have been doing for 6 years, I'm here to find out what I should have been doing for 12 years. But hopefully my final year before I pass the baton on to Marilyn next year. So I'm at St Stephen's in Cinderford as well.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris. That's brilliant that you're here as a pair. Lovely. And Sue Strawbridge, welcome. Sue is also PA to the Archdeacons. Really good to see you and to have Debbie here on the screen as well. Thank you both. Tonight, we'll give you an introduction to the role of Churchwarden, hopefully a reminder of some of the things you're aware of, but also an opportunity to ask some questions. And so we'll give time for you to either ask questions out loud or to drop some questions into the chat function, which you can do at any point, and we'll try and pick them up as we go through. I think a really important thing I'd want to say at the beginning is you're not on your own as churchwardens. You've got teams around you, obviously locally, your clergy colleagues, your PCC members, but I hope you also feel that you've got the deanery supporting you, and us in the Archdeacon's office and the registry as well very much. We're here to support what you're doing locally and to work alongside you. Just before I hand over to Joss, I want to share some of the words that we say in the Churchwardens visitation services. And that's the phrase which I love, which is that the Churchwarden's role is to work with the incumbent to promote the whole mission of the church, which is pastoral, evangelistic, ecumenical, and social. And I love that phraseology. I love that sense of the role of Churchwarden is really to share across the whole breadth of what we do as church together. So thank you for being willing to share in that with us. I'm going to pray. And then I'm going to hand over to Joss, who's got some slides that we'll work through. And we will, as I said earlier, aim to be finished by 8 so you can get away to whatever else you would like to get to. But let us pray. God of all creation, God of yesterday, today and tomorrow, we thank you for your calling of us into the Christian journey, for all that we do as disciples and as followers. We give you thanks especially for the role of Churchwarden and the way in which we can share in supporting your church communities across the diocese. We pray for one another this evening. Amen.
Amen.
So, thank you. I'm going to hand over to Joss now, who is going to guide us through. Joss, maybe you might want to start by telling us a wee bit about yourself as well.
Yes, thank you, Katrina. So good evening, everyone, and very warm welcome to this training session. For those of you who don't know me, I work as a solicitor, and that is one of the qualifications you need to be a diocesan registrar. So I work for a firm in Bristol called VWV, or Veal Wasborough Vizards, and a number of you may have already come across my name and also those of some of my colleagues as we provide the registry service to the diocese. So yes, in order to be a registrar, you need to be a regular communicant member of the Church of England, as I indeed am. In fact, I am the son of a Church of England clergyman, and my father worked in the diocese many years ago. And Stephen, you'll be very interested to know that my father was in fact the vicar back in the 1970s in the benefice that was just Elmore with Longme before it joined in Hardwick as well. So I have a long-standing association with the diocese, shall we say. I'm also married to Jo, and she is ordained in the Diocese of Bath and Wells, and she's been ordained now for 3 years, and she's a self-supporting minister. So I also see some of the practical elements of working in the church from her perspective. So so my firm provides legal advice across the board. You will probably be aware that as the established church,
all activities of the Church of England are steeped in law. And so it impacts on just about every area of church life. And so the intention of the session today is to cover what I think, to begin with, is likely to be a bit of a dry subject, as I will outline some of the black letter law, but hopefully I'll also go on to cover some slightly more interesting elements. So, Katrina, if we could turn to the deck of slides, that would be great. So, on the next slide. So what I'm going to cover, as I say, is the slightly dry element to begin with, the duties and responsibilities of churchwardens under canon law. I'll say a few words about the position of churchwardens in relation to vacancies, or interregnums, as they were previously known. I want to say something about faculties, because I think this is an important area. Some of you may have extensive experience here, but the role of the churchwarden in the faculty application process is an important one. Then I want to look at churchyards. I would say that I probably have more inquiries about churchyards than any other subject. I'm sure Katrina would be able to confirm that that's been her experience too. But they can be quite controversial. As the previous chancellor used to say, happy is the incumbent who doesn't have a churchyard. But I actually do think that they carry opportunities for ministry, but they also can be quite tricky. And then finally, I want to finish on some governance aspects of being a churchwarden, and that includes looking at their ex officio role as PCC members and as charity trustees. So next slide, please. And again. So just to let you know that we have produced this little booklet. It's quite short, on duties and responsibilities. And I think, Katrina, the idea is that this will be circulated after this meeting. So that's no excuse for switching off now, but and reading this later. But hopefully this will be a useful resource for you. Next slide. So, where do we look for the law relating to your duties and responsibilities as churchwardens? Well, the starting point really is Canon E1. I don't know how many of you have actually dipped into the canons, but I would just give a general exhortation to you all that you do actually look it up, Canon E1. It's very short, but it does provide the bedrock of your duties and responsibilities. You can find it online. You just need to type in Canons of the Church of England, and I would type in Canons of the Church of England, because otherwise you'll just see lots of cameras. But that's how you get to it, and it's readily accessible. So that, as I say, sets out the key provisions. There are also other bodies of legislation that apply. Many of you will perhaps be familiar with the Churchwardens Measure 2001. And there's also the Ecclesiastical Jurisdiction and Care of Churches Measure 2018, that snappily entitled Church Measure, which also contains quite a lot of information relating to churchwardens. Yeah, let's start with Canon E1, and the fact that under Canon E1 paragraph 4, you are designated as officers of the bishop, and I think many of you will be familiar with that title, and that you will have a close working relationship both with the incumbent, other clergy in the parish, and the PCC. Canon E14 does say that, and I'll read out what the canon actually says here. It says, they shall discharge such duties as are by law and custom assigned to them. So it's pretty vague. But then they go on to say, helpfully, they shall be foremost in representing the laity and in cooperating with the incumbent. So I think that is at the heart of your role. And sometimes people would say that the expression being an officer of the bishop is a bit of a misnomer. The bishop doesn't really have very much authority over churchwardens. It's the parish that really have the ability to vote someone out at the end of their annual term of office. The bishop only has that ability for serious safeguarding breaches, but otherwise there's nothing the bishop can do. So it has often been described as a bit of a misnomer, that. The duties also include encouraging feedback from parishioners. It's sometimes been said that the churchwarden should be what we would term as a critical friend of the incumbent. So to be able to pass on comments from, or make representations from the parish to the member of clergy, but also to encourage and support wherever that is due. So it is not a good thing simply for a churchwarden to rubber stamp everything that your incumbent may say, or indeed to be critical of everything they say. It is a fine balance that you need to strike in that regard. We have this rather anachronistic wording in the Canon, which refers to encouraging parishioners in the practice of true religion and for your duty to promote unity and peace. You also have under Canon E1 the requirement that you are responsible for maintaining order and decency in the church and in the churchyard. And you also have this requirement that you hold the title to the movable goods in the church. It's a kind of trustee type function in that respect. So next slide, please. You also are responsible for assisting the PCC in discharging its duty of care, in repairing, ensuring and maintaining the fabric of the church. Many of you, I'm sure, will be of your responsibility to report on the condition of the church and to keep a terrier and a logbook in respect of all articles belonging to the church. I've mentioned earlier this role that the churchwardens very often take in faculty proceedings, and you are also responsible for allocating seating in the church. You can't stop someone from from going into the church simply because of lack of seats. So if people want to go in and are happy to stand, you're not in a position to prevent them. Although I should just say that the incumbent can stop somebody who is not a parishioner from attending church services if there are good reasons for doing so. But that's a power that's rarely exercised, and if you're looking at that, that's something you usually need to talk to your archdeacon about or refer it to the registry. You'll also be aware of your responsibilities in terms of preparing for Holy Communion and ensuring that there is sufficient wine and wafers. Again, this all comes under canon law, and also being responsible for offerings and collections. So that is a real romp through your basic duties. As I say, you'll receive the booklet in due course if you want to look at this further. But it is an interesting set of duties, and it becomes clear more as a result of custom and practice what you need to do. There is no sort of handy list or checklist that you can go to say what you need to do, because it does very much depend upon what the custom and practice of your individual church. I then just wanted to say a quick word about churches in vacancy, where many of you, I heard a couple of you refer to you're approaching a vacancy, where you, together with the area dean, will take on responsibility as what are known as sequestrators for the administration of parish life. And it can be pretty hard work for churchwardens, so you all deserve a medal, those of you who've been through that previously. You do have responsibility for the care and maintenance of the parsonage house during the vacancy. Those of you who've been through it before will also be aware of your responsibilities in terms of arranging for clergy and lay support during that period, and that can be quite a heavy workload. Your responsibilities in terms of looking after all the correspondence and registers and files and so on, and also of ensuring that meetings continue during that period. So so you have that general oversight as the senior lay officers during any period of vacancy. And as I say, anyone who goes through that period is to be applauded, because I know it's hard work. Not from personal experience, but because others have told me so. Okay, let's move then to the next slide. I'm now going to speak on faculties and churchyards. So faculty is very important. When is a faculty required? Well, a faculty is generally going to be required for almost anything, unless it's something that is exempted. There are certain things that are so minor as not to require any sort of permission. So cutting the grass, for example. And you'll all, I'm sure, be familiar with List A and List B works. So List A, where they are relatively minor, and List B, where you can seek the approval of the archdeacon. And those are all set out in the faculty jurisdiction rules. And if you're in any doubt as to what sort of permission is required, then I would recommend that you speak to the Darson Advisory Committee, the DAC, who will be able to clarify what sort of consent you're required. But unless, of course, it falls within one of those lesser categories of approval, the List A or List B, the general view that you should take is that anything requires a faculty. It's not, I stress, just about repairs to the church. So it is about introducing something to the church or taking something away. Some of you may be aware of the notorious case in Cheltenham involving a painting by Franz Ittenbach, which was sold without a faculty, which did result in a consistory court hearing as to whether the sale could actually be approved. The problem was that because it was sold without a faculty, the person who purported to have bought this painting didn't actually get good title to it. So we were obliged to hold a court hearing in order to determine that. And I have to say the previous Chancellor, who was not somebody who would mince her words, referred to the churchwardens in that case as having been, quotes, very, very stupid. So make sure that's not you. She was referring there, of course, to the fact that they didn't realise that selling a valuable painting like that would require a faculty. Amusingly, there was a letter in the Church Times sometime afterwards where somebody said that as a result of that case, he became slightly nervous every time he went to empty the vestry paper basket, and would he have sufficient permission for that? Anyway, yeah, if in doubt, ask your area dean or archdeacon or go to the DAC. There's no excuse for not having taken advice on it if you're in any doubt whatsoever. But the takeaway message, I think, is always check. So then I wanted to say something about the test that is applied when the Chancellor considers a faculty application. And this was set out in the case of Re St Alkmund Duffield, the Court of Arches case. The Court of Arches being the most senior ecclesiastical court in this country. And essentially, the test that is applied when you apply for a faculty is to ask what harm will be caused to the church, the fabric of the church, by the proposed alterations that you're seeking. And the the point here is that you then need to demonstrate what the benefits are. And the test that's then applied is whether the benefits of going ahead outweigh the harm that is likely to be caused. So the more historical of the greater the historical significance of the church, and the greater the level of damage to the property, the higher the bar in terms of demonstrating why that the faculty will actually be worth that damage. So this is why it is so important, if you have anything like a major reordering project, to ensure that you're promoting as far as you possibly can the benefits that are to be derived from making those changes. Don't just say, oh, we'll be able to have other people use the facilities in the church, but get letters of support from those people. And that all helps, I think, in terms of demonstrating that the harm is outweighed by the good. I also would just say that it's really important that you consult as widely as possible and engage with your local community. It's not just for churchgoers. It's really important that you consult with the whole parish, including those people who do not regularly go to church. So that means advertising in whatever way you can on the notice board, in particular outside your church. Get people engaged with it. You shouldn't have anything to hide. If the proposal is a good one, then it should go through on its merits. People who try and hide their proposals and hope that no one will notice and kick up a fuss, they often come a cropper. So be open about it, be consultative, be prepared to listen to what people have to say. I just think all that is really important. So next slide, please. So that was a quick canter through faculties. I now want to move on to looking at churchyards in particular, and the diocesan churchyard regulations. So the regulations effectively are permissive. So they tell you things that are authorized. It doesn't mean that because something isn't in the regulations that you can go ahead and do it. As I said earlier, there may be a few minor matters that you can do, but generally speaking, anything that's not in the regulations is likely to require a faculty. Sometimes these things can be approved informally by the Chancellor, but it's usually worth consulting with your area dean or archdeacon about these matters in the first instance. And so, for example, some people would like to have a slightly different or imaginative design of a headstone, which doesn't fall fairly and squarely within the churchyard regulations. And we try and be as helpful as we can. At least the Chancellor does take the view that rather than insist that just because it's not within the regulations that a faculty will be required, what he tends to do is to say that he will delegate additional authority to the incumbent to be able to authorize that specific design if he is satisfied that it's of sufficient artistic merit. So, I think, as I say, in borderline cases, that's a sensible way of ensuring that people don't have to pay a faculty fee for the matter to be considered. Do think about that as a possibility as well. You would need to go through your archdeacon in the first instance, though. I've put on the slide here the importance of publicising the regulations. This is particularly the case where you're dealing with burials, because we have had many complaints about people who have had a loved one, their remains buried in the churchyard, And then they found out about the fairly restrictive nature of what is and is not allowed under the churchyard regulations. And then they've sometimes said, if I had known that it was this restricted, I wouldn't have had them buried here. I would have had them buried in a civic parish. So it's really important that anyone who is looking at a burial, that their attention is drawn to the regulations so they know what to expect when they come to erect a headstone. And we always say, make sure that there is a copy of the regulations either inside the church or in the porch, or preferably both, so that so that people are aware of those regulations, but also do draw their attention to it specifically if they are seeking a burial. So do it at that point, not at the point they're seeking a headstone. I've also put here about the importance of consulting all family members. We have seen a lot of upset caused by people who've taken matters into their own hands by we've had cases of people who've without any proper authority have interred ashes into the grave of a relative without consulting other relatives. I've also seen members of clergy who've authorized interments of ashes in burials where they haven't actually sought the views of other people who might have an interest in that grave. And there was one case a number of years ago where somebody actually brought a CDM, a clergy discipline measure complaint against the incumbent, because in permitting somebody to bury ashes, they had installed a plaque on a grave which had seen the burial of a number of family members, and in so doing, it had killed the bulbs planted by this other family member, who was very upset by the fact that he hadn't been consulted. So consultation in those situations is very important. So next slide, please. Just a quick word then on closed churchyards. This can be quite a complicated area, but I think the main thing to stress is that if your church has been closed, your churchyard has been closed by order in council, which is a formal parliamentary approval, then you cannot have any further coffin burials in that churchyard. Even the chancellor can't even give consent. The only way you can do it is if there is a specific exemption in the order in council, and you have to look back, because some of these things date back to the 19th century, these closure orders, but sometimes there can be exemptions for burials of family members in existing graves. Also, in order to bury cremated remains, that is possible, but you generally would need a faculty for that, unless it's in a garden of remembrance, provided that garden of remembrance has itself been approved by a faculty. So these things are always worth checking on. I put in here a note about the liability for maintenance. I'm afraid that time doesn't permit to go into that in detail, but some of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with the issues that arise from handing over the liability for maintenance to your local authority, your parish or town council. It's a complicated area, and if anybody has any questions on that, I would be happy to answer them. Very briefly, I've mentioned here grave space reservations and PCC policies. Some PCCs don't like the idea of people being able to reserve grave spaces. My view is that if you've got plenty of room in your churchyard, why not allow people to reserve spaces? Often people want to make plans in order to put their personal affairs in order, and you can charge a reasonable fee for it. So why turn away that income? On the other hand, if your space is very limited, then such policies restricting who can actually be buried in the churchyard are likely to be far more important. But please do bear in mind that that if somebody has a legal right of burial, and a legal right arises where you either live in the parish, or you're living in the parish on your death, or you have died in the parish. So even if you, for example, are killed in a car crash in your particular parish, that will entitle you to be buried in the church. Or if you're on the electoral roll, you can't be denied being buried in the churchyard, provided that there is sufficient space. But that's not the same as a reservation, of course. This is whether you actually have a right to burial. And what you commonly see will be policies which prohibit individuals who don't have a legal right to be buried, don't have a legal right to be buried in the churchyard, to say that basically they're all excluded because of the limitations on space. But what I would say is that if you're going to adopt a policy, make sure that it's widely debated, preferably at an APCM, your annual church meeting, with full consultation, so that it's not just seen as the decision of the then PCC. Exhumations, all I would say about that is it's a very sensitive area, but all exhumations require a faculty, and it's a criminal offence to exhume a body from a churchyard without one. So that any applications for exhumations should, even if it's of ashes, should ring alarm bells. I think I've just touched on further burials in a full churchyard, so I'm not proposing to say any more about that at this stage. So next slide, please. Okay, and the next. Thank you. So governance aspects. Just to remind you that, of course, you'll be fully aware that you're ex officio members of the PCC, and as such, you will be charity trustees, which means that as well as the duties and responsibilities specific to churchwardens that I've already outlined, you also have responsibilities under charity law. So it's important, I think, that you do keep up with developments in charity law and understand your responsibilities there. I think it's also important that you familiarise yourself with the church representation rules. They are perhaps a sure cure for insomnia, but it's important that you are familiar with them. You'll be, I'm sure, aware that if you've got more than 50 names on your electoral roll, then you will automatically be a member of the standing committee as a churchwarden. Although under that figure, you don't automatically join the standing committee, although many churchwardens will be voted on. I've mentioned there the treasurer. You may be aware that in default of an appointment as a treasurer, one of the churchwardens will automatically become, excuse me, will automatically become the treasurer, taking on that legal responsibility. I've mentioned delegation of functions. The important point to stress here is that, generally speaking, you can't delegate your legal responsibilities, but you can ask for specific tasks that you undertake to be delegated to others. It's a big job that you do, and I think it's really important that you draw upon others, ideally other PCC members, to help you in your work. And I've mentioned here deputy churchwardens. Now, officially under the church representation rules, deputy churchwardens can only formally be appointed where you've got other churches in your parish. And there are provisions in the church representation rules for their appointment. But there are people who can often there is a practice of appointing deputy, in inverted commas, churchwardens, meaning PCC members who are perhaps thinking about that they might like to become churchwardens in the future. And we would certainly encourage a kind of buddying system for those of you who are already churchwardens to to be able to kind of link up with people who've expressed that interest, and for them to take on that kind of role. So they are, as I say, not having legal responsibilities delegated to them, but they will be helping you out on some practical aspects of your functions so that they can gear themselves up eventually to taking on that role if that's what they so agree. And then finally, looking at your role in relation to ecclesiastical and parochial charities, some of you may be aware that you will have linked charities, particularly if you're part of an older church. There are some sort of minor trusts that may be associated with your church. Some of them can actually be quite lucrative, as I dealt with a church in another diocese some time ago where they had a field which was given by a farmer back in the 17th century, and they then sold it about 10 years or so ago for many millions of pounds for housing development, which paid for an extensive reordering. So happy are those who have those kind of associated linked charities. But the point I wanted to stress here is that those will be charities that are separate from the PCC and will often have their own governance. It's important that you look at the rules that govern them and don't just assume that they get covered by your day-to-day PCC administrative practices. Okay, next slide then, please. Thanks. So just a few practical tips to finish with. Just doing the obvious, ask questions. If you don't know the answer, then speak to your incumbent or to your area dean, or if they don't know, to the archdeacon, and or indeed you can take advice from using the parish's advice system that we operate for complex legal queries. But I would always say go through those proper channels first with your members of clergy before approaching us. So there's no excuse for not asking a question, because you can all get this advice for free. The thing that is a no-no is simply going ahead thinking you know the answer when you're not actually sure. And I've said here, take notes and other records, help your successors, so that there are good records for them to take over when they're appointed. Consider, as I say, appointing a deputy. Be familiar with what the Charity Commission has to say. Perhaps subscribe to their email alerts. Also use the resources that they have available. They've got these very helpful, I think they're YouTube links for 5-minute guides on various aspects of training, and explanations of what your responsibilities are. Attend formal training courses such as this, for example, and also look online for parish resources. The Church of England has got some useful resources that I suspect many of you will have already dipped into. So I think, Katrina, that's the final slide. If you could just move on. So if you've got any queries, there are my contact details, and also the contact details for my Deputy Registrar, Laura Chesham. Some of you may already be familiar with her. So that brings me to an end, and I think we've got a final 10 minutes for questions.
Perfect. Joss, thank you so much for going through all that. That's so helpful. Really, really good to have there. We have got one question in the chat from Graham, who's asking, what is the role or responsibilities of the churchwarden when the local authority maintains a closed churchyard?
Ah, right. Yes. So touching on that earlier point that I made, so the local authority has the responsibility for maintenance, but there are matters which will still require the consent of the PCC, and it's fair to say that I have seen both parties, both the PCC and the local authority, get really quite muddled about this. So, but basically, when you pass over responsibility, you are passing over all the responsibilities that the PCC has for maintenance. But that doesn't mean that they don't require a faculty in the same way that you would. So they can't just take matters into their own hands. So if there are issues in the churchyard, so for example, some local authorities like to carry out repairs to memorial stones that are in a bad state of repair, and sometimes that's because it's cheaper to repair them in situ than it is to take them away. But anything done to a grave in the normal way will require a faculty. So as I say, in the normal way, they take on the responsibility, but if a faculty is required, that then comes back to the churchwardens and the PCC to give their approval to that. Although, as I say, if it's a faculty, they may have to apply formally to the Chancellor for one.
Thank you. Graham, does that sufficiently answer your question? Sorry, I think you're muted.
Yeah, you're on mute. Bottom left. No, still on mute. There you go.
There we go.
Sorry. Yeah, in a closed churchyard, a church in a closed churchyard, what is the boundary of the church which the PCC is responsible for, as distinct from the parish council looking after the closed churchyard? In other words, is it very clear what's the church and what's the churchyard?
It's a good question, and I can actually speak from experience of my own, the churchyard in the parish in which I live, where we have the ancient churchyard, which is owned by it's registered in the corporeal name of the incumbent, but we also have a churchyard extension, which is actually registered with the local authority. They own it, and that's not uncommon. But there will also be cases where the extension is likewise owned by the PCC. But that sort of situation, as I say, where you've got a local authority churchyard as an extension of your own ancient churchyard, it does cause some confusion. But basically, in that sort of situation, it's if the local authority is the burial authority through its ownership, then it deals with all aspects of the administration and governance relating to that part of the churchyard. So its rules will apply in terms of monuments, the rules relating to burials. You'll have to the entries will be made in their burial registers, not in the Church of England register. So the answer is always to check out, if you're uncertain, in whose ownership are the various constituent parts of your churchyard, and be clear on that, because sometimes it just isn't clear.
Thank you, Joss. David, you've got a question. Do raise your hand if you've got a question, or do drop something into the chat. But let's go for David.
Yes. You mentioned that during vacancy, the churchwarden's duty is to keep an eye on the vicarage. We recently had a pre-vacancy meeting because our vicar is leaving in a couple of months. And we were told that we do not now have to look after the vicarage. It immediately passes to the diocese.
Yes, so that, just to let you know, David, that is correct. The way we operate now is that the diocese does that bit of work for you. So whilst Joss is outlining the legal setting, actually our property team do take responsibility for the vicarage, the rectory now during the vacancy. So yes, you don't need to worry about that strand of it.
It's delegation in practice. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did go through it when our vicarage in the parish was used by House of Duty. He retired. I had to look after it for 6 months.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions that people want to throw in? There's one. Very good question, Brian. If someone digs a hole in the memorial garden in order to plant a flower in memory of their spouse, are they committing an offence?
Right. Well, they shouldn't be digging, putting plants in. They're not committing a criminal offence, put it that way, but they are acting in breach of the Diocese and Churchyard regulations. And if that were to occur, then and somebody's unhappy about it, first thing is obviously to discuss it with your parish priest and perhaps at a PCC meeting, and if necessary, consult the registry about that. And the safest way to proceed with these things is very often for me to be contacted and then for me to discuss it with the Chancellor, who can then make directions, because that's often the safest way of dealing with things that could be contentious. That when people take matters into their own hands, there can be sort of pushback on that. Things end up in the local press about how the church has been so beastly towards them. So it's important that you kind of avoid those conflicts by going through the right authorities. May seem minor, and I have known one former incumbent I know found a rose bush being planted on someone's grave, and he dug it up, put it in a pot, and left it in the church porch, and asked that it be taken away. I think he got away with it, but that can be quite a dangerous strategy and can cause significant pastoral upset. So, yeah, so you've said we had to threaten a criminal damage complaint. Yeah, difficult to see how a plant would result in damage, though. Anyway, these things often are highly factual, but yeah, these are things, as I say, to raise with your archdeacon.
Thank you. Other questions?
Looks like the football's beckoning, I think.
Thanks, Brian. Shall we pick up those particular queries outside of the meeting? That might be useful in terms of those historic breaches. Is that okay? Thank you.
Good question, though.
Yeah. Or is that more general about what do we do if people if there's become a pattern of behaviour, Brian? Do you want to say something about that?
Yes, yeah, we have rose bushes planted all over the place and continuing to be planted. We have pots being put all over the place. We have ornaments being put all over the place. We have lights being put on graves because people have done it before.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely that sort of thing needs to be dealt with under the direction of the Chancellor, so that he is your protection, as it were. You blame the lawyers rather than the PCC being criticised. But yeah, they do need sensitive handling, plenty of notice, and what have you. I think sometimes what happens in these cases is you get some incumbents who are pretty lax when it comes to enforcing the regulations, and I've seen some churchyards that are so far gone that it's difficult to resist any applications for for whatever kind of monument, because there are so many examples of where the regulations have been breached from some time in the past. But on the other hand, there are those cases where the PCC want to make a fresh start and say, we want to sort things out and we want to dispense with all the tat.
Yeah.
But as I say, you're kind of, it's a fine balancing act when you're having to address the pastoral concerns of those who perhaps put those lights up. But yeah, it's part of the kind of shrine culture that I think we've developed over the last 20 years or so, which has made some previously beautiful churchyards now look rather, well, not as beautiful as they were.
Thank you, Josh, so much. Unless there are any other questions, we could draw to a close there. Can I just say thank you so much all for your time. Please do have a look on the Churchwardens page on the diocesan website, because that's got lots of bits of information. Debbie and Sue, do you think we've got everybody's names here who is here, so we can make sure we send out that document that Joss mentioned, the duties document? We can do our best to make sure we've got that.
Yeah, we can quickly write them down.
Brilliant. Shall I take it? Do you want me to take a photo of the list? Would that
Oh
be
yes,
easier?
that'd be brilliant. Yeah, thank you.
I was going to say we can put it on the website as well.
Yes, brilliant.
On the Churchwardens page,
yeah,
of the website, so that everybody has access to them.
Yeah, brilliant. We'll make sure those are on the website. We'll send them out to you as well who've been here this evening. And the recording should go up on the website too, so people can see it if they haven't been able to be here. But thank you, huge thank you to you all for what you do. Debbie and Sue, thank you for all that you do in our office to support Churchwardens and local teams. And Joss, thank you so much for guiding us through the legalities for this evening and for being so open to us furthering conversations with you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It is quite a whistle-stop tour of the of the legal requirements, but hopefully people have got a reasonable idea of what they of their duties and responsibilities.
Yeah, thank you. And there is an in-person training session on the 16th of September for all Churchwardens at St Andrew's Church in Churchdown from in the evening. Do come along to that. Bring along colleagues if you would like to do that. Lots more input and conversation there. Thank you all so much. If you're going to enjoy the football, go and enjoy. If you've got other plans for this evening, I hope all goes well. Good night and thank you.
Night, everyone.
Bye.